Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod, sea change.
This really does cement a change of the Republican Party.
Senator J.D. Vance is former President Donald Trump's new pick for vice president. He represents a new era for conservatives.
This is not your father's GOP anymore, and I think that has significant implications for how Wall Street begins to interpret where this administration would go.
At the Republican National Convention is CNBC's Eamon Javers. And if it's not your father's GOP, whose is it? We're digging into J.D. Vance as a symbol of this new conservative economics with one of the movement's lead thinkers, Oren Cass.
Just the choice of him on the ticket, I think, rightfully has the old right, the Wall Street Journal editorial board and so forth, recognizing that they are no longer in charge in this party.
And how populism and other politics play out on social media with venture capitalist Bradley Tusk.
The underlying incentives for politicians who just want to stay in office at any cost is to cater to those groups, and those groups are angry.
Plus, Elon Musk endorses, the Teamsters don't. Fed Chair Powell eyes that 2% target rate. We've got it all right here on the podcast today.
When we get hate mail from both sides, I guess we're doing something right.
It is Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. We match. Didn't notice that till this second. I'm
Thank you for letting me know.
With
Thank you
Kernen and Andrew Ross.
Thanks for the text.
Wow. This is really bright, too.
That is.
It's so bright, I almost didn't take it out of the
Is that like canary, or that is...
I think is it called, what's the...
Canary. Canary yellow.
What's the
The chartreuse.
Banana, someone said in the...
Banana.
I have much...
What is that, a Minion's banana?
Yeah, I guess. I have much yellower ties. This is almost a pastel.
That is a little pale, but...
I didn't want to go with the
shocking.
full yellow. I don't know why. It's got little...
It's like big bird banana.
It's like got like a fish's skeleton on it, which is kind of
It looks
cool.
very summery.
Yeah.
It does.
Meantime, Fed Chair Jay Powell addressing the path to interest rate cuts in a speech that happened yesterday. Here's what he said at the Economic Club of Washington, D.C.
We've been very clear that you wouldn't wait for inflation to get all the way down to 2%. Our test has been for the past quite some time that we wanted to have greater confidence that inflation was moving sustainably down toward our 2% target. And what increases that confidence in that is more good inflation data. And lately here, we have been getting some of that.
Powell saying he thinks a hard landing for the U.S. economy is not a likely scenario. Also something that may be helping the markets.
Delegates and alternates, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to announce that Senator J.D. Vance has the overwhelming support of this convention to be the next Vice President of the United States.
Former President Donald Trump has selected Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his presidential running mate. Vance is just 39 years old. He joined the Senate as a political newcomer less than 2 years ago. He gained quite a bit of fame in 2016 through his best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, which became a Ron Howard movie. Glenn Close is the kind of opinionated grandmother with,
They call her Mima.
Yeah, Mama, Papa. He served in the Marine Corps after the towers came down, deployed to Iraq as a combat correspondent, went to The Ohio State University, and graduated in less than 2 years, summa cum laude, then went to Yale. In the private sector, Vance worked for Mithril Capital. Mithril is the from Lord of the Rings. It's the chain armor that's very strong. It's run by Peter Thiel. Started his own VC firm, Naria, in 2019. In 2022, he ran for the U.S. Senate seat, being vacated by our friend Senator Rob Portman. Took office in January of last year. In an interview with Fox News yesterday, Senator Vance said he received a call from Trump just yesterday asking him to be his running mate, telling him he could help Trump win in I don't know if I call them Rust Belt states, but in the middle of the country, states like Pennsylvania and Michigan. He's from Middletown, which is right near Cincinnati, kind of between Cincinnati and Dayton. And I think I was on Kelly's show yesterday. I said, well, I'm a hillbilly too, kind of from the west side of town. West side of town in Cincinnati is not quite the east side of town. I began my life in an orphanage, not quite the same as J.D. Vance. I had great parents after that, but I identify a little bit with coming up in that type of upbringing in the Midwest.
The book's amazing.
The book's amazing. It's an amazing life story. He looked tall yesterday walking around. I noticed. I didn't know he was that tall, but nice wife and everything. I don't know. He's already, they already had some opposition research ready to go, and there's a lot of stuff swirling around.
Just in terms of things he said in the past.
Well, things he said in the past. I mean, you talked about Ron Howard. Ron Howard has come out publicly and said, he made the movie. I think he thinks that J.D. Vance was a different person when he was writing that. I mean, there's a whole sort of, there's
opposition research, and we can come to you for it. And so why not? How many points? You got like 10 points, or which one?
No, I don't have 10 points. I think I've known him. I've talked to him over the years.
We've had him on he's been on the show with
I think the J.D. Vance that people saw, and even that Steve Case saw, is a different J.D. Vance.
Well, he's probably still the same. Probably still the same person.
Well, J.D. Vance did have some pretty strong opinions.
Did he sell out? Is that the point?
Against Donald Trump before, and I think those are the.
We remember that. But you know how politics works. That's not the first time. I mean, Kamala and Joe were at each other's throat at the debates too, and she said, "I'm the little girl that wasn't on the bus that you prevented." So. It's probably not unusual. Elon Musk says he plans to commit around $45 million per month. And that's a lot of money. To a super PAC backing former President Trump's campaign. Other backers of the group, called America PAC, include Palantir co-founder and friend of Squawk Box, Joe Lonsdale, the Winklevoss twins, and former U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Kelly Craft. America PAC's organizers say it is focused on registering voters, persuading constituents to vote early, and also requests mail-in ballots in swing states.
President Biden speaking to NBC's Lester Holt in an exclusive interview last night. The president defended his decision to stay in the race amid concerns about his age.
Me? Look, I've been doing this a long time. The idea that I'm the old guy, I'm old. But I'm only 3 years older than Trump, number one. And number two, my mental acuity has been pretty damn good. I've gotten more done than any president has in a long, long time, in 3.5 years.
You can see more of that interview right now at NBCnews.com. In other news from the White House, the administration is planning to call on Congress to pass a law that would ensure landlords capped rent increases at 5% or face losing out on federal tax breaks. That plan would apply to landlords who hold more than 50 units. There would be exceptions for new construction and certain renovations. Separately, the Biden administration is looking to sell extra federal land to be repurposed into affordable housing. These policies are set to be announced today as President Biden visits Nevada, which is a key swing state in the election.
A new report from the Associated Press saying that 1.3 million member Teamsters union now considering backing no candidate at all in the presidential race. The report saying the decision has not been finalized, but that the relationship between the union and the Biden administration has been deteriorating in recent months. The head of the Teamsters union, Sean O'Brien, speaking at the Republican convention yesterday, he praised Donald Trump's toughness, but offered no endorsement, said the union is not beholden to anyone or any party. And I would actually suggest that maybe this is a good thing overall.
To be frank, when President Trump invited me to speak at this convention, there was political unrest on the left and on the right. Hard to believe. Anti-union groups demanded the president rescind his invitation. The left called me a traitor. And this is precisely why it's so important for me to be here today. Think about this. Think about this. The Teamsters are doing something correct. If the extremes in both parties think I shouldn't be on this stage. President Trump had the backbone to open the doors to this Republican convention, and that's unprecedented.
O'Brien is not yet scheduled to speak at the Democratic convention in August, but you may remember that Sean O'Brien got into that fight, famous fight with Republican Senator Mullen of Oklahoma. Do you remember when they?
Right.
It wasn't just a sparring, if you will, but it was a sparring.
It was almost a.
Yeah, it was. It almost became quite physical.
Interviews with him yesterday. I think he's reached out and hasn't heard from. I think there's reached out to Biden
Democrat.
and hasn't been invited yet. Or probably still.
Did you notice the messaging and the ties? Like, speaking of the tie you're wearing, what's going on? So
Mine has no message.
Well,
Solidarity with you.
Former President Trump had a red tie. J.D. Vance was wearing a blue one, and then Sean O'Brien was wearing a purple tie.
Really?
Like
you think that was all planned too?
Yeah.
Really? Think the union guys are going to talk
purplish? Purplish?
I don't know. I have lots of. I wear a lot of purple.
The union guys showing up at the Republican National Convention.
Kind of suggests,
but I don't know if those guys. Yeah, but I don't know. J.D. Vance wore
I think that's the messaging they were looking for. That's my guess is somebody told them to wear those colors.
Funny, and we've probably said that before. When we get hate mail from both sides, right? I guess we're doing something right. We get a lot of love, though. We get a lot, mostly love mail.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up after this break, high tariffs, pro-union, it's the GOP's new economics, a populist movement, and Donald Trump's VP pick is front and center. We'll hear from one of the leading intellectuals in this new conservatism, Oren Cass.
Growth has gotten slower and slower. Wages have stagnated. And so, yes, people, conservatives, anyone who's paying attention is recognizing it's time to go a different direction.
More Squawk Pod is right ahead. This is Squawk Pod.
I formally declare President Donald J. Trump and J.D. Vance as the Republican nominees for President and Vice President of the United States.
Here's Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. I want to get to the highlights from day one of the Republican National Convention, including former President Trump's pick, for his running mate. Eamon Javers joins us with the latest from Milwaukee. Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Andrew. It was a triumphant return to the national stage for Donald Trump just a couple of days after that assassination attempt on his life in Pennsylvania. He returned to the stage here at the Republican National Convention with that bandage on his ear. This is the first time we had seen Donald Trump in public since that assassination attempt. And you can see he was pumping his fist in the air. He was met with raucous support from the Republicans in the audience last night. He was walking into the music of Proud to Be an American.
And he will be the next president of the United States.
It was a really uplifting moment for Republicans and for people across the country who were concerned about the former president's safety. He seemed to be in very, very good spirits last night, and a wholesome, fulsome welcome from the Republicans in the room there. You also saw J.D. Vance, the former president's pick to be vice presidential running mate alongside Donald Trump last night. This is the first time we've seen the two of them appearing together since the selection of J.D. Vance as the running mate. The Ohio senator, just 39 years old, now inheriting the mantle of Trumpism to project it forward into the future. Whatever happens in this campaign, Donald Trump can only run and serve as president for 4 more years. J.D. Vance at 39 has decades ahead of him to shape the Trumpist movement in the Republican Party and on the American political landscape. So a significant generational moment there as J.D. Vance becomes the first millennial who would serve in the White House. Guys, a fascinating moment, and the J.D. Vance pick is one that we should talk about because this really does cement a change of the Republican Party from sort of the Chamber of Commerce GOP that we've known in past decades to a more economic populist GOP. J.D. Vance is somebody who said that he likes the job that Lena Khan and the Biden administration is doing over at the FTC in terms of an aggressive antitrust push. He's somebody who's been willing to work with Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown on the left on populist economic issues, areas of concern for him. He said he wants to break up large tech companies and pushed for a more aggressive stance by the Republican Party and by the Senate in terms of the big corporate power in Washington. So this is not your father's GOP anymore, and I think that has significant implications for how Wall Street begins to interpret where this administration would go if they're elected in November. Guys, back over to you.
Okay, Eamon, thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Now for a look at how this move could impact the Trump economic agenda. I want to bring in Oren Cass, chief economist at populist economic think tank American Compass. I want to thank you for joining us. Want to get your thoughts in terms of not just where J.D. Vance sits in terms of his own thoughts, but how you think his thoughts will ultimately influence the president.
Well, Senator Vance has been a real leader in the GOP, in the Senate, in really charting the course for conservatism, for economics that actually focuses on the interests of workers, on understanding what has gone so wrong in the economy in recent decades. And so certainly just the choice of him on the ticket, I think rightfully has the old right, the Wall Street Journal editorial board and so forth, recognizing that they are no longer in charge in this party. And I think in practice, Senator Vance is one of the most thoughtful, innovative leaders we have seen in the Senate in recent years. And I expect he's going to bring that to the ticket and would bring that to the White House as well.
In terms, though, of how you think the president will think about some of these issues, do you think that they are do you think they see eye to eye on all of these things? Simpatico? I mean, we talk about Lena Khan. We talk about the Department of Justice when it comes to mergers, when it comes to regulation of big companies. There are things that Trump has said that seem to maybe be at odds with things that Vance has said.
Well, I think President Trump on policy has always been conflicted between, on one hand, some commitment to the old right view of things. Obviously had folks like Larry Kudlow very influential in his administration, and a new way of thinking about things, on trade, on immigration, on even industrial policy, on a whole host of issues. I think he's been much more skeptical of market fundamentalism and much more open to really shifting the party. And so it's always been a fair and open question, what would he do in a second term? He had some choices like Doug Burgum, like Glenn Youngkin, that would have indicated one direction he was heading to go, one way he was thinking. And he had choices like Senator Vance and Senator Rubio that indicated a very different orientation. And in Senator Vance, I think he's sent the strongest possible signal that he is persuaded by this new way of thinking, and that is generally speaking the way that he wants to head. I'm sure they won't agree on everything, but obviously you don't pick Senator Vance as your vice president if that's not the set of discussions you want to be having.
Well, that's the other question. It feels like a doubling down in some ways, and I'm curious whether you think politically this was the right decision insofar as, to the extent that you want to have a broad tent, does this push the party and push the Trump agenda one way, as opposed to sort of bringing in maybe some folks who might have been in the middle to join?
Well, I guess that depends on who you define as the folks in the middle, right? I mean, the reality of what's going on in the Republican Party in the broader political realignment in America is that you're seeing, yes, some more highly educated, high income folks leaving the Republican Party and heading to the left. You have a bunch of libertarians who are suddenly trying to decide which party they want to be in. But for every one of those, you might have 10 working class Americans of all races who are much more socially conservative to begin with and are now very excited about the message that they're hearing on economics. And so I think, if you're trying to sort of play the game of the past couple of decades and kind of do the Karl Rove thing and win by a few votes, maybe you make a different pick. If you're actually trying to build a durable governing majority that's going to push this country forward, I think the direction that Senator Vance takes things, the direction that a Trump-Vance ticket might represent, who they can bring together, is by far the much larger constituency.
Or last time you were on, I guess horrified is a strong word, but it almost sounds like heresy. Some of that. The populism you're describing almost sounds like it's closer to progressivism than classic conservatism. And we all, I think, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, everybody wants to raise everyone up as much as they can in terms of economic prosperity without necessarily, you don't want to bring the top down for us all to meet at the bottom. You want to raise it up. And it's almost like you're saying the jury is in on trickle down, and growing the pie through growth policies doesn't work anymore. I don't think some of these things you're talking about will generate growth. It may feel good, and you may engender populism and bring in some more people. But if they're fundamentally bad economic policy, it's not worth it. And I'm wondering, do I need to be a neocon? I don't want to be a neocon. Do I have to join the Lincoln Project? I don't want to go that way. Oren, is there a place for Larry Kudlow in this new scenario?
Well, I think there's a place for anyone who's willing to look seriously at what has actually gone on in the economy over the past few decades. I mean, I love growth. I'm all for policies that are actually going to generate economic growth. And the reality is that, as you just called it, trickle-down economics, this idea that all we need is more tax cuts, and somehow doing whatever is best for capital is ultimately going to be best for everybody.
Money in the private sector. I mean, all those things are...
Well, let me answer the question, Joe.
They're time-tested. They're time-tested, though, Oren. I mean, we're the most successful country in the world with the best middle class. We've taken more people out of poverty. These other countries are chasing us, trying. In Europe, their GDP has grown 40% slower over the past 40 years. China's, rolling, but their GDP per person is 10 grand. We're $50,000 here. We're the envy of the world. But you know what? We got to go. Answer as quickly as you can.
Well, very quickly, time-tested is just wrong. The American tradition since the founding was, among other things, protectionist policies. We always had high tariffs. We always had industrial policy. What you're describing as time-tested is a blip over the past couple of decades. And it's not time-tested. It's time-failed. Growth has gotten slower and slower. Wages have stagnated. And so, yes, people, conservatives, anyone who's paying attention is recognizing it's time to go a different direction. I'm very excited to see Trump and Senator Vance going a different direction. And please get on board, Joe. Take a look at what's actually happened.
Let me look into it, Oren.
Okay. Oren, thank you.
Next on Squawk Pod, the virtual road to today's political climate. Venture capitalist, former campaign manager Bradley Tusk on how social media helped us get here to a polarized nation.
It's Republicans, it's Democrats, it's earned media, it's social media, it's activists, it's super PACs, it's podcasters, it's pundits, it's all of it.
Plus, how about that Elon Musk super PAC? Why the Musk-Trump endorsement makes sense.
Elon Musk, for all of his accomplishments, really benefits from the status quo, right? He is a genius at acting like he is subverting the status quo, and yet what does he want? He wants government contracts for SpaceX. He wants Section 230 preserved.
Welcome back to Squawk Pod.
Up and Becky, Q.
You are watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
In the aftermath of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, both sides of the political aisle are examining the rhetoric that's polarized our nation, especially online. Joining us right now to talk about the impact of social media, Bradley Tusk, CEO of Tusk Ventures. He was also campaign manager for Mike Bloomberg's mayoral campaign in 2009. How much do you think what we saw, the tragic events of Saturday, are a function of social media today?
I think it's definitely part of it, right? I think we now have an atmosphere. You're seeing each party blaming the other, but the reality is it's everything, right? It's Republicans, it's Democrats, it's earned media, it's social media, it's activists, it's super PACs, it's podcasters, it's pundits, it's all of it. But what social media does, and we've talked about this here a lot, is it brings out the worst instincts in everyone. And so things that you wouldn't necessarily say to another human being face to face, you feel very free to say on social media, especially have some level of anonymity. And so, yeah, it just brings out the worst in us and makes all of this more likely.
And therefore, you would fix it how?
I think you'd fix it how? By doing something we've talked about a bunch on this show together, which is you've got to change the underlying liability protections that the social media platforms have. Right now, Facebook and X and TikTok and everyone else has more freedom to say whatever they want than you guys have here on Squawk Box or the New York Times or any other mainstream media outlet. They are not responsible for the content posted by their users. And as a result, two things happen. One, the users post the craziest stuff possible because that's freeing for them. And two, the platforms are rational economic actors, and their goal is to make as much money as they can. And they know that negative content generates more eyeballs and more clicks than positive content. And as a result, they push that out there. And so if you have a company that knows I can make more money by doing something bad, they do it.
Let me ask you a separate question. It's not just happening in social media. I mean, it has transformed itself. Either I don't know if it transformed itself from social media to the real world, or the real world has transformed itself to social media. But the point is, it's gotten meaner. It's gotten nastier. Yeah. And there are very few people that seem to be standing up and saying this meanness and nastiness can't continue.
Right. Well, look, I mean, part of the underlying problem is we have an electoral system that drives polarization. Because of gerrymandering, the only election that typically matters is the primary. Primary turnout is typically around 10%. Who are those voters? They are the far left, they are the far right, or they are special interests that can move money and votes in low turnout primaries. And as a result, the underlying incentives for politicians who just want to stay in office at any cost is to cater to those groups. Right. And those groups are angry. Those groups are mean. And so all of the incentives you want to keep your job is to echo that rhetoric. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, so I always argue there's too much money in politics. But if you could actually use the money for good, meaning to take the influence that you have, you don't see, frankly, wealthy donors actually say, I'm not supporting all of this craziness. They say, well, it's a binary thing, and I just have to decide, I like this guy better than this guy, so I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, I personally think that if we were to put our money, and this is something that I'm doing with my money, into structural reform of the system as opposed to just backing more and more candidates doing the same thing, that's how you change it. So, for example, out of my foundation, we've been building technology that will allow people to vote securely on their phones, because what I learned, especially when I ran all the campaigns to legalize Uber around the US, is that if you let people advocate politically from their phones, vastly more will do so, and that increases turnout, and you go from that 10% to 30.
Right. But here's the question. Even, Elon Musk will tell you, I believe, that you can't really let people vote from their phones. That if you let people vote through technology, that these systems are going to get hacked. People won't believe in it. You already have them. We're already in this moment where there are people who don't believe the vote.
We already have a system that A, is highly vulnerable, B, nobody believes in it, C, our entire electoral system and our entire political system is a dumpster fire, D, Elon Musk, for all of his accomplishments, really benefits from the status quo, right? He is a genius at acting like he is subverting the status quo, and yet what does he want? He wants government contracts for SpaceX. He wants Section 230 preserved so that X can make more money. He wants lots of tax incentives for electric vehicles for Tesla. So this is a guy who very much has a strong economic interest in A, keeping things the way they are, and B, betting on who he thinks will be the winning candidate, because it translates into a lot more money for him and his companies.
That wasn't the case with Biden.
Well, yes and no. Biden has, and NASA and DOD have been pretty good clients of SpaceX and the infrastructure bill. And if you look at the climate measures in the Inflation Reduction Act, put more money into green energy, more money into electric vehicles, electric charging, everything else than any time we ever have in history. And so while Musk has been, and Section 230 has been completely preserved under Biden. So while Musk may be vocally more Republican and he may think, hey, I can do even better off with Trump, he's done pretty well.
I think he would say, look at how much has been wasted on the EV, not the tax credits for the cars, but actually the build out of the charging stations. That has not worked.
Both of them.
Excuse me?
Both of them.
Yeah.
Both of which?
Both of the charging stations that we've built.
Right. Have not. That's
what I mean.
Have not.
Right. It's a joke.
Have not been a success.
It's like two of them.
Right. Same thing with broadband access.
I'm here all week.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, Tesla literally never gets off the ground without all the tax credits.
I don't disagree.
For EVs.
100%. By the way, what do you make of his PAC?
Look, I think he is a really clever guy, and I think in a lot of ways he reminds me of Trump in that he is seeking maximal gain for himself at all times. And one of those things right now is, how do I get as much attention as possible? And if you endorse Trump right in the aftermath of the assassination attempt and say, I'm going to give $45 million a month, which was kind of a weird number, but let's just say that it makes him the biggest donor to a Trump super PAC. That will, A, get him a lot of attention. We are literally sitting here right now on national television talking about him. That makes him
What
happy.
do you think that does to his business, though?
I think that he has this unique ability to inspire retail investors in a way that literally no one else does. And every time he does something that they deem to be smart, that benefits him and his businesses tremendously.
Bradley, it's great to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And that is Squawk Pod for today. Thanks, as always, for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. You can tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern, or get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears when you follow Squawk Pod, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.